Hi, everyone. Dipti Bachani here. I am the Senior Vice President of Automotive and IoT at ARM. And I'm thrilled to be joined here with Jeff Ma, who's the Vice President of Microsoft for Startups. Jeff, welcome.
Thanks for having me. Am leading the Microsoft for Startups program, have been at Microsoft about 18 months now, and came after a 20 plus year career as an entrepreneur in the Valley, having started a bunch of different businesses. But am really excited to try to help Microsoft and startups broadly.
That's incredible. So during this session, we're going to talk about Jeff's experience on these startups that he mentioned, CircleLending, Citizen Sport, tenXer. You've got a list of great startups that you've worked on. And also we'll talk a little bit about ARM and Microsoft and what we're doing to help startups. But of course, a conversation about your journey starts with your time at MIT, of course, because that's really cool. So those of you that don't know, Jeff was a member of the MIT Blackjack team, and his team became so renowned that inspired the 2008 film 21, which starred Kevin Spacey and Kate Bosworth. Blackjack's my game in Vegas, but evident to the amount of money I've lost, I certainly don't know how to count cards. So tell us about that experience. Tell us what that was like.
Yeah, it's kind of a surreal experience now that I look back on it. I mean, honestly, at the time, it was just something we did together. There was a group of us that used math to beat the casinos, and essentially it was the sort of big data concept before there was even such a thing. I mean, blackjack is the only game in the casino that's subject to something called conditional probability, meaning what you see impacts what you're going to see. And so essentially you can use math and probability to sort of beat the odds and turn the odds in your favor in the game of blackjack. And so there was a group of us that over the course of about 7 years would go to Vegas, would play blackjack, and would win for the most part. And we were able to make it almost like a little bit of a summer job or a little bit of a weekend's job. And honestly, in many ways, it was what gave me the opportunity to be an entrepreneur relatively early in my life, because I had sort of this other source of income that allowed me to sort of pursue more entrepreneurial pursuits.
That's neat. And in its own right, it was a business of sorts for you, because it was a profit and loss for all intents and purposes. Somehow you had to get to Vegas, and then you made money, right? And you probably lost a couple of hands, I hope, if you're human. A gambling superstar, and that gave you the money, per se, to start at work on entrepreneurship and starting your own companies. But what fascinated you to start your own business? What inspired you to say to start your own company?
I think for me, there was just a pull to the idea of working on smaller types of companies, right? Because ultimately, when the companies are smaller, you have an opportunity to do more yourself and to learn more yourself. And I, with the exception of tenXer, which was the last company that I started, I, for the most part, was never someone that said I want to start a company. The opportunities just came to me in sort of different forms from people that I wanted to work with, who had ideas, and they thought there was an opportunity for me to work with them on it. So in the company Citizen Sports, Pro Trade, which it was a sports company, a sports analytics company, and the other founder, Mike Kearns, he kind of approached me about needing me as a sort of key partner of his to work on the company. Before that, CircleLending, Ashish Advani, who was the sort of core founder, tapped me because he thought I'd be a good partner to help him build out all the early tech for the business. So I don't know if I've ever been someone that's been oh, I need to start a company until tenXer, where it was very much about me wanting to start a company. And I think it was because I had been sort of I don't want to say secondary founder, but I'd been the non-primary founder in most of the businesses that I'd been involved with, that I really wanted to now be the primary founder. And honestly, I don't think that's a great way for entrepreneurs to approach startups, because ultimately you want to start a company because you have tremendous passion around something that you want to build or a problem that you want to solve, much less about just wanting to basically start a company, which is what happened to me.
And you ended up being successful. So you obviously have a magic touch. But there's two elements you talk about. You talk about people and an idea, right? Those are the combinations that made you, that inspired you to go forth with it. But those ideas, I mean, of course, I come across a lot of startups. I'm sure you do too, in my work. Those ideas have to be ahead of the curve for a startup to be successful. You can get away with other stuff at large companies, but really for a startup, it has to be ahead of the curve. You're solving a unique problem, and how do you identify that? How do you know, is this really going to be unique? Is it going to be ahead of the curve? Is it a unique problem that's going to then give me lucrative results?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the reality is that sometimes you can be too far ahead of the curve, and I'm not sure if the real, what you really want to do is be ahead of the curve, because like ultimately, I have been in situations where I think like I have been too far ahead of the curve, and ultimately what you want to do is be focused on solving a problem that you believe you have a unique approach to, and that you believe that is a problem that exists. And so if it's a problem that already exists and and it's validated, does that really mean that you're ahead of the curve? I'm not sure. And like ultimately, again, it's like having that laser focus on solving a problem that a larger company may not be able to solve, and being able to solve that problem sort of better than it's being solved right now. To me, that's like the essence of what you want to do as a startup.
And that makes total sense, right? And if you look at some of these large companies, being Intel, ARM, Microsoft, there are a list of problems that we just either don't have the bandwidth to solve, or that other companies are going to be better at solving because they're maniacally focused on solving it, and that adds unique value to us. And of course, from that perspective, it moves the industry forward at a speed much faster than we can alone, right, ourselves. So, in addition to being working in startups, you're also a best-selling author, a speaker. You help professional sports teams. This is really cool, and media powerhouses using big data. And I find that really intriguing, because one of the things I always say is data is useless unless you know actually what to do with it. Right? You get obsessed with collecting data, but then we don't know actually how to know what to do with that data. But as you've gone through this journey, I'm sure there's been some challenges. If you want to look back, what would you do differently? What have you learned through this?
God, it's a tough question. I mean, I think ultimately, the key to this whole data movement really is about data. And as sort of elementary and rudimentary as that sounds, it's really important, because I think one of the things that we all forget is that getting good data or collecting data it's not easy, and it's sort of the building block or the start of any real excellence or data driven framework. So I think it is important to think about like the early investments that you make in your company being around capturing data, capturing unique data, even just some of the early ideas and things that you might have, being able to like test them to collect initial experimental data about what will work before committing resources to problems. Like, so I guess what I'm saying is like you have to be somewhat scrappy with data, and then you also have to somewhat invest and really have a commitment to building out the right machinery to use data to drive innovation and change.
And if you were to speak to a CEO or someone that's got an idea for a startup, any advice that you'd give them? What advice would you give them?
Just talk to a lot of people, talk to people to validate your idea, really talk to customers and understand if you're solving an important problem for customers. I think, you can't really ever undervalue, or the moments that you get to spend and talk to customers, like your prospective customers, because ultimately we all have ideas and thoughts. And I think one of the things that entrepreneurs are usually particularly good at are selling their ideas. And if you go into a customer and you sell them on an idea, of course they're going to say, yeah, I really want that. But that may not really mean that, right? Ultimately, it just might mean you're a really good salesperson and you're really good at conveying your idea. What you really want to do is instead like ask them, hey, what are some things you need? What are some things you want? What are some problems that you have? And kind of dive into that. So that this concept of customer discovery is
Yeah.
such a foundation that I think is so important that entrepreneurs need to get really good at. Because again, like entrepreneurs are always going to be really good at selling their ideas, and the better they are at selling the ideas, often the worse they are at actually understanding what the customers and the prospective, audience needs. And so when I talk to some entrepreneurs, I'm like, you're gonna have to like dial back the charm and the charisma when you go in and you tell your idea, because you're gonna really want to like get real feedback on your idea without it being something that you're selling into them.
That is so cool and true, right? I mean, we sit in these roles, we see a lot of startups, and often we'll say, yeah, well, that's cool. I take it. Would I pay for it? That's a different question. Does it solve a problem for me? Well, it's nice, right? And so, and you don't actually get to the essence of what you really want to know is this critically important? Like you mentioned earlier, is it the top 5 problems you need to go solve, not number 25 in the bottom of the list, right?
Right.
Um, and that's a cool position that the two of us are in our roles today, because one of the things I say is my job is to facilitate the world's innovations, right? I'm always amazed at, and it just amazes me at the kind of creative solutions people will come up with the technology we build, because we build foundational technology, and from there, just it's beyond my wildest dreams, the kind of stuff that people will come up with. And so today, when you look at that, what do you think are the biggest opportunities for startups?
Um, God, I mean, I think we've never had a better time for startups than we do now. And a lot of it is because of just the sort of trends that, globalization and virtual things that the pandemic has like largely caused to accelerate. So I think, you see a lot of these situations where companies are going virtual and be embracing this like hybrid work style. And I think that was going to happen eventually, but the pandemic certainly made it happen quicker. And so when all these companies are accelerating into digital and are having to like really be forced to innovate, that offers a whole set of like you basically have just like all of a sudden accelerated the pace of innovation and the willingness to adopt new ways of working or new ways of thinking about things, or you basically just created a set of opportunities for startups. So I mean, I guess like the excitement or would be really be around trying to understand what are some of the problems and opportunities that this new world that we live in, i.e. hybrid work and virtual and all of the different things that are happening right now. What are the opportunities afforded by that?
I do agree with you. It's an incredibly unique time and a fruitful time for startups. Is often in our career, the journeys that you and I have been on, we've seen one industry being transformed, or we've seen something being developed. We went to the mobile space. But if you look around today with big data, analytics, artificial intelligence, you see multiple industries all being transformed all at once: the automotive space, the home space, the workspace, the retail space, name it, industrial, manufacturing. All of it at one time, you're seeing a disruption, which is a pretty incredible time and ripe for opportunities. And then what you just mentioned, which is probably the very few benefits of the pandemic. Everything's got a silver lining, I guess, and the pandemic has its share of silver linings, I guess. As you see ARM and Microsoft, what specifically do you think we could do together, and what are we doing together that you think can help the startups that are listening today?
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately, like I mentioned, it's my goal is really first to help startups. Beyond, like, obviously I work for Microsoft, but the idea that we can help startups, and our goal is to sort of be able to help startups at each phase of their journey. And, you know, those opportunities are really like, you know, at the idea stage or at the build stage or at the growth stage. And then working with you know, large organizations and enterprises, we're really focused on, can we bring innovative solutions? Can we help these startups go to market? Can we help get them in front of the audience that ultimately tells them, or, you know, just as we were talking about being very customer driven, can we get them in front of more prospective customers? Because again, when I think of our stakeholders, really it's around startups first and then Microsoft customers second, because ultimately we need to bring them really interesting, innovative solutions. And then finally, if we're able to do that, ultimately we help Microsoft. But again, you know, just being able to sort of get startups exposure to, you know, customers and to people that are prospective buyers and to people that know specific industries and can pressure test them on, you know, different new technologies and new customer problems. And again, like, as I mentioned, like the biggest thing is to be able to get in front of customers and be able to like actually talk to them about what their real problems are.
Often feel like a matchmaker, right?
Exactly.
Of sorts. And, you know, one of the things that we're doing at ARM is we have ARM at Flexible Access for startups. So we just remove the barrier to entry for startups to get access to all of our technology. They can start working, because all of that's any money you spent right up front is difficult, right, for startups. And so we just reduce that barrier for startups to be able to
Yes, speed and cost are so important at the early stage for startups, and that's all they really care about. And,
exactly.
you know, at Microsoft, I think that's one of the things that we obviously need to get better at, right? Is because since we're built for the enterprise, speed and cost are not where we would probably say we excel. So working with
Yeah,
people like yourself, like, really helps us maybe try to change that.
right. Just giving them easy access, making it easy so that it is fast, right? All the basic stuff, just easy for the startups. So what does the future look like for Microsoft and the startup program? What do you see the future?
Yeah, I mean, we're really rethinking how we engage with startups. You know, I think the historically, this program had been built around two major motions. One is go to market with Microsoft, and the other is around credits for building on Azure. And we kind of want to rethink everything where, you know, we're really focused on creating, you know, scaled experiences that help startups at each phase of their journey. And there's a variety of different parts of the journey that we think about. We think about the idea stage, we think about the build stage, we think about the growth stage, and then the exit stage, right? And at each phase, we want to have something that helps those startups. And then, you know, horizontally across that whole continuum, there's a need for financing and there's a need for hiring. And so again, like, those are areas that we think we are, you know, have an ability to help startups. So really the future is trying to focus again on startups as our customer and trying to understand how we make startups successful using the resources that Microsoft has.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for taking the time with us. We really appreciate it. I think we got some really good nuggets of experience from you for the startups that are listening, and thank you for taking that time.
Okay, thanks, Dipti.
Bye.